measurements in mind. So what I do for the technique portion of this, guys, is you'll cut your wire and then you finish one side first, and we'll finish all three now so you can see how to do this if you're not familiar with how to add your wire guardians. You're going to cut your 3 strands of wire, and if you're doing a bracelet, anywhere between really, you know, anything between 6 and 8 inches, just cut like a 10-inch piece of wire. That should be plenty for you to add the wire guardians and crimp on both sides. That should be plenty. So for any standard bracelet size, cut about 10-inch piece of wire. So you'll cut 3 10-inch pieces, and then once you cut each piece, you will finish each side off with your wire guardian and your crimp, and then it just goes faster for you to string your beads on. So to start this out, that's what you do. You cut your wire, then go ahead and finish off one side with the wire guardian and the crimp, and then begin to string, and then stop, and then do the same thing with the second strand. Get your wire guardian and your crimp on, string your pattern, and then the same thing, repeat that on your third strand, okay? And so now that I have done exactly that, let's go ahead, and now all we have to do is finish this off. So what I will do now is I will finish each strand individually, and then we'll put them together. So in order to do that, it's the same process that we do to start these strands off. We are going to go ahead and, let me get this stuff moved up here. We're gonna go ahead and feed on a crimp, okay? And then we will feed on a wire guardian. And if you're not familiar how to use a wire guardian, I do have a tutorial up on both crimping and wire guardians in my Jewelry 101 series playlist. If you want to look at that playlist, that's got some really great videos in there for all that beginner technique stuff, such as what we're doing right now, adding wire guardians and crimps. And so then we just go ahead and pull it down. And again, we're gonna make sure we're flush on one side, and we're gonna just kind of make sure that either you're holding it or you're laying it down kind of, it's a little bit twisted. We wanna make sure we have movement in our beads. We don't wanna make it too tight laying it flat, because we do want it to, you know, go around the wrist. So just be mindful of that. And then we're gonna go ahead and squeeze that wire guardian together there. And now for me, guys, I'm using the magical crimper. And so because I'm using the magical crimper, I'm gonna just put a piece of dummy wire right in here. Now, if you're not using the magical crimper, just ignore this step that I'm doing right at the moment. And the reason I'm doing that again is because I just want this to be really nice and secure, because I've got 3 strands going on here. We're putting 3 strands together. On a bracelet, they do tend to get a little bit more wear and tear than a multi-strand necklace, right? And so I'm just adding that dummy piece of wire in there because I am using the magical crimper, and I just want to make sure that there's a lot of wire in there and it's full, and my crimp is really secure and tight. And again, it's because it's a bracelet, and you know, when we're doing multi-strand bracelets, and we're crimping them using beading wire and crimps, you know, they do tend to get way more wear and tear than a multi-strand necklace. So that's all. And then of course, I'll do my tug test, just like that, tugging on my crimp to make sure it's not going anywhere, and it's not. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and we'll cut our tail off. And I'll cut off that dummy wire. Just got fed through the other side of my wire guardian, so I'm just pulling it up straight so I can get it nice and flush. Now, if you happen to be using a magical crimper, you can go ahead and put a piece of dummy wire in there. Just depends on your wire size, really. Okay, and so that's what we have. So now we have finished off our first strand exactly the same way on each side. with a wire guardian. Okay, we're just going to do the same thing now with our last 2 strands. So we'll feed on a crimp, and then go ahead and feed on our wire guardian. And then we'll put that tail right through that crimp. And I always go through my first bead, just like that. And now I'll pull my tail. And again, I'm gonna make sure that my bracelet has a bend in it when I'm pulling this. So therefore I know that I've got movement in my beads. And now I'll go back and I'm gonna squeeze my wire guardian. Squeeze it together with your fingers there. And let me make sure I'm flush down here. Yes, I am. Okay, great. And now let me just pull that a little bit more, make sure that's pulled down nice and tight. And then again, I'm gonna grab a piece of dummy wire and just stick it right in my crimp and just right through that first bead. Just like that. And now we'll go ahead and crimp that guy down. And then we just go round and round. And using the magical crimper again, you guys have probably heard me say this 1,000 times, but if you're new to my channel and you haven't heard me say this before, because you're new, I'm going round and round because I'm using the magical crimper. And by going round and round, it turns your crimp tube into what looks like a round bead and gets rid of all of the edges and the corners. And so that's why I'm turning it round and round like that. If you're using a regular crimping tool, it'll still work with this technique. You would just do one standard crimp like you normally do. And now we'll go ahead and flush cut all that extra wire, get rid of all of that. Okay, and I'll do my tug test. Yep, very good. That's not going anywhere. And now our second one is done. So we've got 2 done, and the last one, we'll just do exactly the same thing on the third one. Is to put those 3 strands together, just lay them, whatever, way you want. So I'm just gonna put my bigger beads in the center, and then each smaller strand is gonna be on the outside. So this is, again, the other important part is just make sure, let me get my chain nose up here. I think I'll use my bent nose. You're going to want to make sure, guys, that when you are feeding on, this is the only part that just be really mindful of. When you're feeding on your strands, on your jump rings, we're going to be very careful on each side that we're feeding them on the correct way. So we're going to feed each strand on identically on each side, okay? And so we will pick up a jump ring, open up your jump ring. And because we've got 3 strands going on, I would go ahead and give it a decent crank, so we need I think a decent opening on our jump ring, okay? And so now I have them laid out in the order that I like them. So I'll start with this strand. It doesn't matter where you start, but when we first start, but now it does moving over here, as I was just saying. So anyway, so now I've got my my first strand on right there, so I'm keeping a hold of my jump ring, and then I am going to feed on my second middle strand right there, and then my final third strand right there. And then again, I'm keeping a hold of my jump ring here, and now I will go ahead and feed on that clasp. Super simple. And of course it's magnetic, so it's gonna go all weird on me because it's gonna attach to everything. And now we'll go ahead and crank that jump ring closed. Make sure that's nice and secure, which it is. And let me show you, and that's what we have. Okay, so we've got our clasp, a jump ring, and all 3 strands here fed on that jump ring. Okay, and now we're gonna go ahead and lay it flat, turn it around, and do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so we have a jump ring. I've already opened this one. It looks like that's open pretty decent. Okay, and as I was just saying, we're going to be mindful that we've laid it down flat so we don't get it all twisted up, and we're going to feed them on the same way, the same direction that we just laid this side on. So we will pick up the first strand, feed it on, and then we'll pick up the second strand, feed it on, and then of course our final strand and feed that on our jump ring. So we've got all 3 strands there. And now what we're going to do is we will grab the clasp and other side of it anyway. And I'm going to get that on there. See if I can turn this a little bit. So I've got my clasp on there. Now we'll just get those jump rings closed. And I'll squeeze them, putting pressure, moving inwards as I'm doing that, guys. Okay, and now that's what we have. So I'm going to show you, we've got the clasp, right, with 3 jump rings there, and then this is the same direction on the bottom. And so now when we close it, voila, super easy, and that's what we have on the back. Now you can even go a step further, guys, and if you want, you can even add like some dangles here. But if you do, just FYI, if you want to add some dangles for a little something extra, you can certainly do that on your jump ring. You can also add them to your wire guardians right here. That would be really pretty. But I'm not going to, and the reason I'm not going to, this particular bracelet, these beads are actually glass. They're really heavy, and I've got so many of them on here that it's already heavy enough for me that I'm going to forego doing some dangles, but that would be really actually a really cute idea. So if you have some lighter beads, that would be a fun idea, you know. And if, to be honest with you, if I was adding any dangles on my ends here, I would probably add them on my jump ring, not on the wire guardian. Now you can, but what's going to happen is, you know, you see how these lay so nicely, and yes, they will move along the body, right? When they're on the wrist, they will move, right? These strands. But if you put the dangles on your jump ring, that is going to prevent the strands from moving so much. So that's kind of a cool idea because it keeps them more intact. Now, if you put them on, if you do some dangles and put them on your wire guardians, just giving you a couple of tips here, then, you know, they'll flip and flop, and then they could get caught in between the strands. So just kind of a little tip idea there. So I have to pull up my cuddle dud. Pull up my cuddle dud sleeve, and let's see what we have. And again, I love these magnetic clasps. I need to buy stock. I am telling you. Because they're just no muss, no fuss. And they go right on, because I don't particularly myself. And some of my toggles are awesome, but I just really despise fussing. Fussing on the wrist, but look how perfect this is. So those measurements ended up turning out wonderfully. So I ended up stringing only like 6.5 inches worth of beads, just so you know. By the time we crimped, we went ahead and added those wire guardians, a jump ring, and our clasp on both sides. We wound up with a nice 7-inch, probably 7.1/8 inch. And so there you go. That's what that looks like. Isn't that beautiful? It's so pretty, and it looks so cool in the back. And that's what I was just suggesting. You know, you can even do some dangles, but I'm not gonna, because it's heavy enough as it is. But just look at how pretty that is. It's the magnetic clasp, what comes off so super easy. And that's what we have, you guys. So I hope you enjoyed that quick tutorial, and maybe a little design inspiration for you guys on how to make a fun triple strand bracelet. Until next time, friends, have a blessed Friday, and we'll see you tomorrow for show and tell.